There are more than 900 stone circles in the British Isles, and almost none elsewhere. This is at Avebury in Wiltshire. These are the hurlers in Cornwall, a rare triple circle. One of the rings is now ruined, but we brought the site to life again by placing a flame source where each stone used to be. There are many varieties of circle. They aren't all the same by any means. Only by studying all of them can we begin to discover what they used to mean. This is a recumbent stone circle, with the largest of the stones lying on its side between two flanking stones. Recumbent stone circles only occur in northeast Scotland. They tell us something about what people believed when they built them. 5 pounds of cremated human bone, largely that of children, were buried when it was built, and scorched earth and charcoal were found as if from a pyre. At Midmar Kirk in Aberdeenshire, a recumbent stone circle was, in the end, enclosed in sacred ground. The church built close beside it, as if to take away the devilment and Christianize its mysteries. As late as the 18th century, local people were still coming to these stones to celebrate their weddings, to ask for fertility, or, surreptitiously, to give pagan baptism to their children. The largest recumbent stone in Aberdeenshire at Old Keg weighs about 53 tons. 300 people would have been needed to move it to the hilltop site, using wooden rollers, simple levers, and muscle power. We asked Aubrey Burl, who has spent his life studying stone circles, what drove people more than 4,000 years ago to build monuments of this complexity with such an expenditure of effort.
The answer, I think, is probably fear. They were living in a time when they had no science. They had epidemics, they had blizzards, they had diseases, their cattle died, their children died often before they reached the age of 4. And they had no safeguards against this. I mean, they had lots of common sense, but they had no real way of saying, we can stop a blizzard, we can stop a drought, we can get rid of disease amongst our crops. Now, if you have that sort of insecurity, you suspect that there are forces of nature around you that somehow or other you have to get into contact with, you have to appease, placate, make offerings to. So you build special places, sacred rings, where you can perform your religious activities. And then, of course, you have to make offerings of some sort to get in contact with the spirits. And what more powerful can you offer than the remains of a human being? I'm not suggesting these circles contain dozens of sacrifices, they don't. But in every circle we know, like this, with these great recumbent stones, there are the remains of human beings, the burnt bones of them, at the centre of these rings. And I think this gives us one sign of the importance that people placed upon them and the great amount of sacrifice, offering, dedication they were prepared to put inside these rings so that they could keep their own world under control, keep it in balance, because otherwise they were afraid the whole world would collapse.
Recumbent stone circles probably tell us more about the meaning of stone circles than any other type. Pottery, flints and cremated human bone were buried within them. In this film, we follow Aubrey Burl's progress on a dig at a ruined site near the village of Strichen.
The remarkable thing about this site is that it's been destroyed twice. The first time, in 1820, there was a tenant farmer here. He obviously looked at the stones and said that they were just a nuisance. He dragged them away, and Lord Lovat, who must have lived in this now ruined house down there, was furious and ordered this chap to put the stones back, which he did, but he put them back wrongly, much to the confusion of archaeologists, because the recumbent stone, instead of being at the south or the southwest, ended up at the north. But the stones were in a great coppice, and they stood there undisturbed for, what, another 140 years or so. And then, about 1965, the trees were going to be cut down, and the farmer once again asked for the trees to be removed, and not only were the trees removed, but the stones as well, and they're all dragged off, and they ended up down here in this little hollow, tree stumps, burnt trees, and of course the stones themselves. The stones came from a site which is directly in front of me, where there's a great circular bank, I'm walking up it now, that originally went all the way round the ring. You can see it came back here. It was at one time, I suppose, about so wide, and perhaps this high, made up of small stones and earth. And even today, it's possible to see where some of the stones once stood because there are little hollows in the bank. I'm walking into one now. It's perhaps this wide. It's not very deep, but it's almost certainly the place from which one of the circle stones has been dragged. Well, this bank enclosed a great open central area, in the middle of which is probably the most exciting thing about the whole of the stone circle, because in the middle there's the remains of a ring cairn, which we can see just here in front of me. Well, this is the bank of the ring cairn. It runs all the way round here. It was never very, very high, but in the centre there is an open central space. It's what? Well, perhaps 6, 12, 13 feet wide. But although it's not a very spectacular place, it's the place where all the archaeological goodies are going to appear. This is the place where prehistoric people lit fires, great pyres in which they consumed the bodies of the dead. This is the place where they buried newly broken pottery, and above all it's a place where they sometimes dug pits and put in the cremated bones of sacrifices, ancestors. Of course, these are the questions that archaeologists are always seeking the answers to. And the important thing about Strichen, of course, is that this is a site really which has never been touched before. It's not been explored by treasure hunters, and with a bit of luck we shall find many more of the clues to this mystery of the past that we're looking at today.
This is what Strichen looked like in plan before the 6 surviving stones were removed in 1965. This is the site as Aubrey Burl found it, with traces of a bank enclosing a circle 20 metres in diameter, and a ring cairn apparently evident in the centre. There were no stones left in position, but a heap of stones lay close to the site towards the southeast. This site, 7 miles away at Avebury, is what a recumbent stone circle looks like when it's been excavated and restored. The circle has a diameter of about 12 metres, with an eccentrically shaped recumbent stone towards the southwest. The midsummer moon would have appeared to skim low over this stone and to set behind the one flanking stone which still stands. In front of the recumbent stone you can see a scattering of white quartz, which was placed there deliberately as if to reflect the light of the moon. In the centre of the ring, the original builders buried fragments of cremated human bone, pottery, flints, and left traces of charcoal. It's characteristic of this sort of circle that a bank of stones was erected, as if to enclose the magical space. But in this case, the bank was enlarged by people later than the original builders, and they also smashed the top off the stone that can be seen in the foreground. It was after his successful excavations at Avebury that Aubrey Burl was asked to undertake the excavation at Strichen, which we filmed. The first dig at Strichen began in April 1979, at the tail end of one of the worst winters we've ever had. Scottish mist and fierce winds made the hillside desperately bleak for the team of excavators gathered together by an American organization called Earthwatch. The site had been carefully measured and fenced in. Now the volunteers began the hard physical labor of stripping the turf.
Real good.
Very few of the volunteers had any serious experience of archaeology, but in the early stages at least, they didn't need it. Aubrey Burl had told them what to look out for: since even at the early stages it is possible that fragments of flint or pottery or cremated bone will turn up. This is what the site looked like after the turf had been cleared from the southwest and northeast quadrants. It was encouraging, even at this early stage, to find lumps of white quartz just beneath the turf. We'll be coming back to the dig at a more advanced stage to see whether the quartz meant what it seemed to. The recumbent stone circles of Aberdeenshire are tiny compared to the massive bank and ditch of Avebury in Wiltshire, and yet the purposes of the builders and their beliefs were certainly similar. Avebury, wrote John Aubrey in the 17th century, so far excels the grandeur of Stonehenge as a cathedral does a parish church. A village stands inside this great circle. Some of the houses were built from fragments of the stones, but coachloads of tourists still come to stare at the remainder, to play, to wonder what the monument once meant. This is what it must originally have looked like, with an outer circle of 99 stones enclosing two smaller circles of 30 and 27 stones, and with avenues leading towards it from two directions. Of the two inner circles, this one at the south is best preserved.
Well, this is the beginning of the south circle. It's one of the two circles inside the ring. As you can see, the stone's absolutely enormous. This sarsen must be about 20 feet high. It certainly weighs over 20 tons. And if you think altogether there are some 30 stones in this circle, or were, you can get some idea of the effort that's gone into it. I think originally this was the very first ring, and probably all around here, long before that bank and ditch and other stones out there, there were probably huts, cattle, children, women making pots, gathering all around here, and people put up these vast stones as a sort of temple here in what became the centre of Avebury. And it was these sarsens dragged from the Marlborough Downs, and I suppose they were dragged, each one of them, some 5 miles or so, because you can't bring them directly from the Downs, you had to bring them along gentle slopes. I mean, just think of this thing going down a steep slope. It was these stones they had to drag here year by year to put up this circle. A tremendous effort by people, some 5,000 years or so ago.
Within the south circle, there was originally a line of stones, known as the Z feature, and a large central pillar. This obelisk was destroyed in the 18th century, but fortunately, a commentator recorded what it had looked like.
The heart of the monument is here. This is the obelisk. It's a little concrete pillar now because the stone has been smashed, but originally it towered up here, probably higher than any of the stones in the circle itself. Now, of course, the question is, what was it? What's it doing here at the very, very middle of the ring? Well, part of the answer, I think, probably lies in these mysterious little pits that we see now marked by patches of concrete, just here and there and there. There's even another one out there. These pits, which were dug by prehistoric people, held nothing but good, rich, loamy earth, the very earth that people would want to grow their crops and to keep their cattle safe, to keep their children healthy. Their offerings, as it were, almost hints to the spirits of the underworld as to what was most needed by these prehistoric societies to put up these great rings. Now, how are they going to persuade these spirits to give them rich earth and security? The answer seems to be through the use of human bones, maybe ancestral spirits. And we know that human bones were brought to this circle because even here, by the obelisk itself, just down here, there was a little pit with a pot and burnt human bone in it. Well, it's possible that that was put here much later, but certainly, even when the stones were being erected, human bones were brought here because by that circle stone just over there, once again, there was a pit in front of the stone, and in that pit, there was a human skull. No jawbone, no skeleton, just one human skull deliberately buried in front of the stone. Most people coming to Avebury think that the stones and the bank and the ditch are the really important things about the site, but it's what's come out of the ground that tells us most about the people, and luckily there have been two very important excavations here. One by St George Grey before the First World War, and then another one by Alexander Keeler just before the Second World War. And we have photographs of some of the fascinating things that they found here. For example, Gray, in his very good excavations of the ditch and the bank, discovered that this ditch was an incredible 30 feet in depth. See this long ladder? Or in this one, this is a ditch on the west side, not only the ditch but the little figure in the bottom, almost lost. Or here, in perhaps the most spectacular of all the ditch excavations by the south entrance, 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of figures. You get a fifth one in down here. And of course, this is the level that we walk on today when we walk in the bottom of the ditch. And all this has been refilled behind us. And then Keeler turned his attention to what now stand in the avenue, but in his time were missing stones. They just weren't to be seen. And here, in this invaluable collection of photographs, there are album after album of them, we can see the stones lying buried in the pits that people in the Middle Ages dug for them. I suppose this was because these were pagan stones, and the Christian minister obviously wanted this place of the devil removed from sight. And so year after year, people must have come to Avebury from the surrounding villages, pushed the stone over and buried it, because first of all they dug a very, very large pit for it. And in one case there was a tragedy, because when they pushed a particularly large stone over, you can see it here in this photograph, the pit wasn't quite big enough and the stone fell and then remained in a tilted position. And so the villagers asked someone to get into the pit and dig sort of a rather bigger cavity for the stone, which he did. He got in, and just at that moment the stone fell. And when Keeler excavated the site in the 1930s, he came across this poor fellow lying there, and we know that he must have been a barber surgeon, a chap travelling around from fair to fair and market to market with his leeches and his lancet and his pair of scissors. But these excavations tell us a tremendous amount about the people who actually built the site. We can find their flint tools that they used for cutting skin and scraping the fat off. We can see their splendid bowls. They're all handmade, and this one's been decorated by pressing the end of a bird bone into it. Beautiful piece of pottery. We can see their stone tools. This is an axe. This one comes from Cornwall, but others came from Wales or from the Lake District, brought from over an incredible distance. And we know that all these things were made round about 2600 by native people. And then a couple of centuries later, other people came to Avebury, the Beaker people, and this is one of their splendid pots. It holds about a pint and might well have been filled with mead, one of the first alcoholic drinks in Britain. This pot was found where one of the stones of the Beckhampton Avenue had stood, and buried beside the stone was not only this beaker, but the rather pathetic skeleton of a little child, 6 years old, lying there by the foot of the stone. Now, we also know something about the religious beliefs of these people, because they've left behind some rather mysterious objects. I mean, what, for example, would we make of this little carving out of chalk today? Well, it's rather difficult, isn't it? But you can just see here, perhaps, the division that marks one leg and another leg. The little band round here, and sort of the top of the body here. It's a little figurine. This object isn't at all in doubt. This represents a male sexual organ, because fertility was a very important part of the rites here at Avebury. But I don't suppose that we shall ever understand what this mysterious carving is. Now, these people, short-lived, digging out this fanatical ditch, had the most simple, primitive tools we can imagine, because that ditch, and hundreds of tons of chalk had to come out of it, was dug with tools like this. This is a pick made out of antler, and what the people did was to take off most of the little branches but leave one at the end, and then of course they could use this to hack into the chalk, or if the chalk were too hard, and down at the very, very bottom the chalk is as hard as rock, then they would put the end of the branch against the chalk and banging like this with a heavy stone until the lever went right in, they could prise the chalk up. In fact, we can see on this one how the end of the branch has been smoothed by constant hammering, and the back end here has been battered and bashed where the stone has had been crashed against it. And when the chalk was loose, then they used a shoulder blade like this. This is a great shoulder blade of an ox. And they would use this to scrape up the chalk into wickerwork baskets and heave it up onto the bank. 500, 600, 700 people, I suppose, working for 100 years or more with these very, very simple tools to create what is perhaps the most fantastic monument in the whole of prehistoric Britain.
The North Circle at Avebury is now almost entirely destroyed. Very few of the stones are left standing, and the size of the whole site is such that you form almost no impression of what used to be there. But originally there were two concentric circles, the outer one with 27 stones, the inner with 12, and with what is called a cove, a three-sided open structure within the two circles.
Well, this is at the very, very heart of the North Circle, and we have here two enormous stones of what used to be a three-sided setting. One here, another great stone there, and there was a third one here. They faced approximately to the northeast, where the midwinter moon would have risen on the far horizon when it was full. And of course we ask, just as we did about the obelisk in the South Circle, what was this cove? Well, there are one or two other ruined coves in stone circles. There's even one down on the Beckhampton Avenue to the west of Avebury down there. That's ruined as well. And all these coves, they're three settings like this, seem to be imitations of the entrances of megalithic tombs. Now there's tombs of great stones that were put up perhaps 1,000 years before Avebury, and we know that human bones were brought to them. Skeletons, skulls, a lot. Now whether they were brought here to Avebury we can't be certain, because this whole area here has been excavated, but it's been excavated so badly in the 19th century that we aren't really certain exactly what came out of the ground. Some animal bones, some bits of prehistoric pottery, and that's really all we know. But my guess is that the ceremonies here also used human bones, that they were connected with the rising of the moon, so we have to think of moonlit ceremonies, torch-lit processions perhaps, a very, very dramatic ceremony at some time of the year, and connected of course with the ceremonies that were taking place in the South Circle as well.
The ceremonials at Avebury weren't confined to the area of the circles. Down this avenue, from another stone circle now destroyed, human bones were carried in procession, perhaps at autumn, for pits containing ritual burials of autumn fruits were found along this avenue. The stones here were paired to suggest the shape of male and female sex organs, another indication that the rituals were concerned to ensure the fertility of crops and beasts and women. On a hillside nearby, you can still see a round barrow under the trees. It's a reminder that the land here has been fertile, cultivated, and relatively heavily populated for more than 5,000 years. And a large and skilled population must have been needed to construct a monument on such a scale as Avebury. Within a mile at West Kennet, there is another grand monument which predates the stone circles. This long barrow, an earth mound about 300 feet long, concealed 5 stone-built chambers once filled with human bones used for ritual purposes. A little after the Avebury stone circles were built, the chambers were filled with potsherds and earth and capped off with great stones, as if their ceremonial usefulness was at an end. This is what was found when they were opened. Immediately between West Kennet Long Barrow and Avebury lies Silbury Hill, the largest prehistoric monument in Europe. So that the great ring at Avebury, the bank, the ditch, the avenues, the 2 inner circles, represent the culmination of a long tradition of monument building for ritual purposes. They shouldn't be thought of in isolation. With a village now inside the circle, roads through it, and so many stones missing and replaced by unattractive concrete plinths, Avebury still remains a most remarkable monument to the ingenuity and ambition of our ancestors.
The building of Avebury was a fantastic achievement. Just imagine here you had over 170 stones that were dragged from the Marlborough Downs, a couple of miles away. Think also of this incredibly deep ditch and the material, the chalk that was dug up from there and heaved up onto the bank by what, 500-600 people who had nothing else but antler picks, shovels made of ox shoulder blades, wickerwork baskets. It's all done by human muscle power, and the amount of chalk that came out of that ditch could have built a fair-sized Egyptian pyramid. That gives us some idea, I think, of the efforts that the people went to. And it wasn't just efforts. The whole project is a great design. Somebody thought of a great outer circle, they thought of this ditch, they thought of the bank. And the work was never completed in his lifetime. It must have taken 4, 5, maybe 6 generations. The people who started it never saw it finished. Now, we know that the natives whose work this was were helped by newcomers to the district called Beaker people. They had rather different beliefs. And at the end of the ditch in this south entrance where I'm standing, the Beaker people buried the body of a young girl. She lay just down there in an oval setting of stones. She had 1 or 2 little bits of chalk rounded into balls by her, nothing else. And she lay there as though she were guarding the entrance, just where the Kennet Avenue leads southwards over the hill and up again to the sanctuary stone circle.
Even after its builders had moved away or been displaced, even when beliefs started to change, Avebury and the other stone circles remained powerful places, centres of magic.
Yes, please, go.
Back on the site at Strichen, things were not going altogether smoothly. One of the areas originally opened up had been completely abandoned, and a new area had been exposed in the northwest quadrant nearest the camera. An exploratory trench had been pushed out far to the north of the confines of the original site. Aubrey Burl described himself and his team as 18 archaeologists in search of a stone circle. Nothing was quite as Aubrey Burl had expected. However professionally encouraging he tried to be in the evenings for the sake of his volunteer participants, the strain and the responsibility were considerable. What little they had found seemed to make almost no sense. There was a real risk that they were still digging in the wrong place.
Suppose that stone hole is the edge of the ring cairn.
Yeah.
And the recumbent stone and its flankers are indeed, when we first calculated them, about a couple of feet or so to the south.
Yeah. There we are.
In that case, you're not going to find them, are you?
With his site assistant, Gerald Butterworth, he struggled to make sense of what had happened on the site. It had evidently been destroyed, cultivated, transformed in ways of which nothing in the written records gave him any clue.
No, there's a bit more to come out there. Come on, come on, come on. Stop messing about. That's better.
Even the most enthusiastic of the American participants seemed a little jaded. They continued to work effectively, but some of the enthusiasm had gone. These were the areas that the team had originally uncovered. There was no sign in either of them of prehistoric occupation. Opening up a further section in the northwest quadrant produced a healthier result. Traces of the east flanker and the pit for the recumbent stone were starting to come to light. They were now searching, perhaps a little desperately, for some evidence that would confirm these positions and lead them to find the position of the west flanking stone.
It's about, there'd be very few stones anywhere in this area.
Yeah.
These...
Well, they're the only ones actually in this last 6 inches.
Well, there we are. Well, in that case, they could well be sort of little packing stones from the hole itself. The hole, we're going to get somewhere near the bottom of the hole. It's on the right line between the east flanker and the recumbent there. If we've got this, which is going to spread out here, and that other stone hole, then we're in business with a recumbent stone circle. But there's hardly a thing to be seen in it. Maybe... It's going to be a very, very... Oh, there it is again. Oh, we've got an edge. through it, see what happens. Here we go again. Good. Yes, that's right. Well, get somebody else now to get it round. Well, I've got to have a look round the side. But...
Undisturbed soil stratifies naturally into layers of different colours, each with its own special name. When the builders of stone circles dug a hole for the stone and a ramp leading down into it, they displaced soil from the bottom layers, and this ought now to be visible below the level of the modern topsoil. The next step, for the original builders, was to place pebbles and small stones at the bottom of the hole. Then they carefully slid the heavy circle stone in down the ramp. They levered the stone upright with wooden levers and ropes of skin, and used larger stones and earth to jam it into position. Also in Aberdeenshire, they placed lumps of quartz around the stone, and sometimes buried pots below or near it. A stone set into the ground like this can stand for thousands of years, while topsoil accumulates around it. If you drag it away, topsoil falls into the hole and the edges are destroyed. It's only right at the bottom that you can see its structure clearly.
All this is disturbed soil. The edge of the hole here has been cut right into the sandy clay that's running down here, and of course as soon as you start throwing sandy clay up out of a hole, you get all this upcast spread around here, which explains this very uneven surface. It's all been thrown out of the hole in front of you. And here at the bottom of the hole, what's missing, a very large piece of quartz. There have been these other little bits of quartz in the hole itself, which is another good sign of a stone hole. A bit of white quartz showing up clearly in the side there. So the stone hole, yes, with this huge piece here, of course, that must have tumbled in when the stone was moved. This is the back of the hole. It would run round here and come out, and I suspect that in the end, when we've sorted out, a lot of these stones will have been pulled and tipped out, and the front of the hole will come around here. So very nice.
The red starts up again about where your knees are.
That's fair enough. So it probably is round about here. Then I was going to see if there are any stones down here, but that's a pretty horrible thing to do to a stone hole, because there could be a pot down there, or there could be some human bone. If you start pushing this down blindly, you're going to break something. So as it was going very, very nicely, I didn't do that. We just do it gently with a trowel, and we scoop out the soil. And of course, the soil in here is this dark colour, which is quite unlike the bright yellow that's come from the stone hole when they were digging it out, so that you've got this very, very pleasant contrast.
This is the first stone hole that they found, that of the east flanking stone. And after 2 weeks' work, they had finally begun to locate some traces of the west flanking stone as well. But a much more crucial discovery lay a few feet to the northeast of the east flanking stone, where traces of another large hole at last confirmed Aubrey Burl's final supposition about the original position of the stone circle.
Well, we started today by not knowing really where any of the stones were, but now I think we've located a place where the west flanking stone stood. There's just the beginning of a stone hole here, and then off to the east we have the position where the recumbent stone was propped up. You can see there are lots of pieces of white quartz around here, and very nice pieces, and also some of the bigger stones that were used to keep the recumbent stone horizontal. Now beyond that we have probably the top of the east flanking stone. It's been broken when the site was destroyed in 1965, but its tip is lying over a very well-defined stone hole, which is lined, floored with much smaller pebbles, so that we now have the west flanker, the recumbent, and the east flanking stone all in a very nice line here. But of course that didn't tell us whether the circle once went this way or whether the circle stones ran out in this direction. Well, fortunately today we found another stone hole. It lies down here. There are bits of white quartz all round it, and then running away from it is a rather ill-defined bank of stones. You might just be able to see it rising up as a little bank at the edge of the excavation just there. That bank runs round all the way around here, and we've uncovered part of it in this long section that we've dug out through the side here, and the bank is showing up as a rather untidy, messy run of stones, some 12, 13 metres out from the recumbent stone, which of course lies to the south-southeast here. So I think now we can say we've got the flankers, we've got the recumbent stone positions, we have a circle stone out there, we have this bank running round here to here, it'll run out there, and at the end of this very pleasing day we can probably start making a plan of the whole site, knowing where the other circle stones are going to be all around the area.
Knowing what he did about circles where the stones had never been moved, Aubrey Burl was now able to predict the sort of diameter that he might find at Strichen, the number of stone holes that he might eventually expect to find, and the fact that the stone holes would diminish in size as they most nearly approached the opposite side of the circle from the recumbent. This circle is at Sun Honey, well preserved, with a small bank, 11 stones including the flanking stones, the smallest stone on the opposite side to the recumbent, and the stones gradually increasing in size back towards the flanking stones, which are always the tallest. Recumbent stones like this one are only commonly found in Aberdeenshire and southwest Ireland. The surface of the stone is marked with unobtrusive man-made depressions called cup marks. These are found in other recumbent stone circles and also in certain Irish circles and tombs. There seems some evidence that the people who built these circles in Scotland had associations with people in the west of Ireland more than 500 miles away. All the recumbent stone circles in Aberdeenshire had good sight lines towards the horizon. However unobtrusive or small the stones, these are at North Strone and they're made of solid quartz, it's usual for the recumbent stone to be almost precisely horizontal. It's as if its relationship with the horizon was of importance. It was certainly a deliberate part of the construction. At another stone circle at Avebury, the surface of the recumbent stone is not at all regular, and yet the stone itself has been levelled by the use of a water trough or of this convenient depression on the surface. When you look underneath, you can see how. The base has been shaped to form a rough triangle, and the stone was balanced in a pit and levered one way or the other before it was packed up. At Avebury, as elsewhere, there are open sight lines towards the southern horizon, and the celebrants at midsummer, sprinkling earth or pouring libations by the light of a bonfire, would have seen the moon pass low above their great recumbent stone. When you find, as here at Loudon Wood, a recumbent stone circle romantically surrounded by trees, you can be absolutely certain that the trees post-date the circle. But what is fascinating about all the recumbent stone circles is the number of archaeological artifacts that can be found within them. Flint tools, traces of human bone, the remnants of great fires, ceremonial pots and pottery, all deliberately buried as if to help archaeologists along. And the chronology is clear. All these circles were built between 2500 and 1500 BC. The great open circles of southern England are quite different. There are almost no artifacts to be found. But they are surrounded by legends, which are of such a richness that they may even suggest something of the purposes to which the stones were once put. At the Rollright Stones in Oxfordshire, legend claimed that the stones could not be counted, unless by a king, or by the man with enough penny loaves. The same legend is connected with stone circles from Cornwall right up to Scotland. Did the original builders of this circle bring bread to feed and placate the spirits of the underworld? Was the ability to count and calculate unusual and rare, perhaps something strange and forbidden? The legend goes on, having placed a loaf on each stone, you count the ones remaining. If you are unfortunate or have been impious, one of the buns will turn into the devil and carry you away. Throughout the country, people thought the stones had power. They were often said to be petrified human beings, turned into stone because they danced and made merry on the Sabbath. The King's Stone, very near the Rollright stones, was said to weep on one particular day of the year, and on another to go down to drink water at the local brook. And around this stone on Midsummer's Eve, the youths and maidens of the village would gather each year to make merry with cakes and ale. The legends about the stones are all about celebration and the invocation of powerful spirits, the spirits that give life to the seed. To ensure life and to placate evil, twin necessities for survival in all simple societies. Back at Strichen in the early summer, work was resumed with a new and enthusiastic group of American volunteers. Additional areas had been opened up, all to the north of the original site, and the evidence had begun to make sense at last.
When we were here at Easter, we expected that the grassy bank we could see then was the original prehistoric bank, and the reason for that was that we had a perfectly good plan of the site, which was made by Professor Alexander Thom in about 1960, before these stones were removed. And as you can see here, there are the flankers and the recumbent stone, and a couple of other stones as well, and this line round here represents the bank, and so it seemed a reasonable guess that this was the original prehistoric site and that the recumbent and its side stones had been moved from somewhere at the south of the circle. And so we started off by driving a great section through here and another one up here to see if we could find any evidence that this was indeed the prehistoric site. And this area can be seen on here on this site plan. Well, we soon found out that in fact that bank we looked at was not prehistoric, because from it came objects of bottle glass like this, bits of quite modern pottery with glaze on it, roof tiles, and I'm fairly certain now that what we found was a landscaped bank with the circle stones inside it, put up sometime around about 1830. Well, if that was the case, it probably meant that this recumbent had never been moved, and that it was still in its prehistoric position. So the circle had to be to the north, because the recumbent is always at the south or southwest of these rings. And so this time we've been opening up other areas up here to the north. And sure enough, from them have come lots of prehistoric objects. Great lumps of pottery like this. This is a part of a Bronze Age urn. It's very coarse, it's very thick, but it is prehistoric. And there are some other very, very nice pieces, rather thinner, well-made pottery of the same period. We've found objects of flint. This is a very nice little flint knife, made from material that came from some 7 miles away. There is a beautiful, a really lovely little arrowhead. It's got a couple of tangs on it and a little barb down there. It's made of a very fine flint called Buchan flint. As you can see, it's red, and this also belongs probably to the early Bronze Age. So we have plenty of material like that, and it's coming from the bank where the circle stone stood around here. And we've also found the place where the east flanker stood, where the west flanker stood, the recumbent, and inside here there are the remnants, rather badly damaged by trees, but nevertheless still there, the remnants of a cairn. Also in the same region came this rather inconspicuous and unimpressive little piece of white material, but this is cremated human bone. And of course this is very often found in recumbent stone circles. And so I'm quite certain that now we have found the original position of the circle, and that down here is the landscape version of another circle put up in about 1830 AD when this site had been destroyed.
The work now was painstaking and complicated. The team recorded the position of almost every stone found on the site and sketched all the details of the soil layers and soil variations. Additional artifacts continued to turn up. The position in which each was found was carefully logged. This small flint flake was once used as a scraper or a knife by the builders of the original circle. The weather continued to be foul, but the mood was cheerful.
I spotted this stone hole when it was just a twinkle in the sight's eye, you know.
Exactly the same, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
He's really brave, isn't he?
As the stones were laid bare, many of the problems of interpretation became clearer. This was where the west flanking stone had once stood. Most important of all, traces of charcoal were beginning to come to light.
Sorry, let's have that bag open, Roger. And I'll drop these bits in, and I want you to close the bag up instantly. Close it up. And when we've got this up, you will seal this first bag very tightly, roll the thing up, and seal it very tightly with sellotape, and then the label will go inside. You put this in the second bag.
Traces of charcoal, if substantial and uncontaminated, allow a site to be dated by one of the most precise methods available. Nevertheless, the dig at Strichen had been extremely complicated and laborious. We asked Aubrey Burl if he'd ever have begun if he'd known how difficult it was going to be.
Yes, I'd have started, but I think I'd have been even more cautious than I have been already. It's a very, very complicated site. It's not only been disturbed in 1830 when the stones were rearranged, it's not only been disturbed in 1960 and 1965 when trees have been uprooted and the stones were removed as well, but I suspect also that it was disturbed in antiquity by other prehistoric people, and before that the landscape around here was altered by the original prehistoric builders of the circle, so that there's hardly a single ordinary layer of soil, a natural layer of soil, on the whole site, and it makes life quite complicated.
Because of all the problems, the work on the site had been slow and often inconclusive. Had Aubrey Burl found enough to make the digs worthwhile?
Well, we found charcoal, and we found flints, and we found pottery, and there is a central feature. Yes, we found them. What we've got to do is to decide what relationship these things have to one another. And after, 5.5 weeks, it's really only today that we actually started excavating, and until now we've been trying to find where the site is.
The problems with Strichen and the digs there were almost unprecedented. Few, if any, stone circles can ever have been so much mucked about. But the evidence answered one crucial question. Strichen did not represent a different form of recumbent stone circle, with its recumbent stone towards the north. Instead, it conformed to the patterns established elsewhere, with the recumbent stone towards the south, a diameter of about 16 meters and a crescent-shaped feature in the central area. Later in 1980, a new team will start again on this site. In the end, the villagers of Strichen, who helped actively with the dig, will see their circle come alive again, and the stones will be re-erected. The painstaking and laborious work at Strichen needs to be duplicated all over the country before the mysteries of our ancestors and their stone circles will begin to come clear. Even Avebury has never been completely excavated. Many sites have never been properly surveyed. But the evidence that emerges is of a rich culture, a meaningful and potent religion which lasted more than 2,000 years. That religion has left its mark in our folklore and on our landscape, as the original builders intended that it should. The circles are symbols of life and death, places where the underworld and the elements were brought into focus. We still need to know much more about them.